Want to create a modern bento grid layout using pure CSS? In this tutorial, we'll build this responsive design from scratch using CSS grid, gradients, hover effects, and media queries. Let's get started. Let's begin with the main container that will hold our entire bento grid layout. Inside it, create a header div. Add an H1 heading with the text bento grid, along with the sparkle emoji for a modern touch. Then add a span with the text modern CSS layout. This creates the heading section at the top of our bento grid. Now create a div with the class bento. This will be the main grid that holds all of our bento tiles. Inside it, add another div with the classes tile and hero. The tile class gives it the general card styling, while the hero class creates the larger featured area. Finally, add a span with the text featured, followed by an H2 heading that says, Design Systems That Scale. Next, create another div with the classes tile and accent. The tile class applies the general bento card styling, while accent gives this card its special highlighted appearance. Inside, add a span with the text projects to label the card. Then create another div with the class big and add the number 128. This gives us a large, eye-catching project count inside the accent tile. Here, we're creating a simple response tile. The span displays the label response, while the heading shows a response time of less than 2 hours. This keeps the information short, clear, and easy to scan within the bento grid. Next, create 2 more div elements and give them the classes tile and media for the first one, and tile and coral for the second. The media tile creates a visual area in the bento grid, while the coral class gives the second card its colorful highlighted background. Inside the coral tile, add a span with the text status, then add an H2 containing open. This creates a simple status card that clearly shows the current status. Next, create another div and give it the classes tile and team to create our team card. Inside this card, add a span containing the text team. This acts as the label for the section. Next, create another div with the class avatars. Inside this container, add 4 span elements, each with the class avatar. These elements will be styled later to look like overlapping team member profiles. Finally, add a P element and write 12 members inside it. This gives us a simple team section that displays the team visually while also showing the total number of members. Next, create another div and give it the classes tile and quote. Inside the card, add a span containing the text testimonial to identify this section. Then, create a P element and add the text "They shipped fast" inside it. This creates a simple testimonial card that displays a short customer quote within our bento grid layout. Next, create another div and give it the classes title and CTA. Inside the card, add a span containing the text contact to identify the section. Then, create another div with the class arrow and place the arrow symbol inside it. This creates a simple contact card with an arrow that can be styled and animated later using CSS. First, reset the default spacing on every element by setting margin and padding to 0. Then, use border box to make sizing more predictable. Next, let's style the body to create the foundation of our bento grid page. Set the font family to System UI with a sans serif fallback for a clean, modern appearance. Then, use white smoke for the background and midnight blue for the text color. Add 40 pixels of vertical padding and 20 pixels horizontally to create comfortable spacing. Set min height to 100 VH, making the page fill the screen. Finally, use Flexbox with align items and justify content to center the entire layout. Next, style the main container with a maximum width of 1100 pixels and set its width to 100% so it remains responsive. For the header, use Flexbox to arrange the content in a row, space the items apart, and align them vertically. Finally, add 24 pixels of bottom margin to separate the header from the bento grid. Next, let's style the text inside our header. For the H1, set the font size to 28 pixels and use a font weight of 800 to make the main title bold and prominent. Then, target the span and set its font size to 14 pixels, with dark Slata gray as the text color. This creates a clear visual difference between the main heading and the smaller subtitle. Next, let's create the main Bento grid layout. Set display to grid so our cards can be arranged in rows and columns. Then, use repeat for 1fr to create 4 equal columns. Set each automatic row to 130 pixels and add a 16-pixel gap between all the cards. This gives us a clean, evenly spaced 4-column Bento layout. Next, let's style all our title cards with the common Bento grid design. Give each card a white background, a 20-pixel border radius, and 20 pixels of padding for comfortable spacing. Set display to flex and use flex direction column to arrange the content vertically. Then, use justify content space between to spread the content across the card. Add a subtle 1-pixel Gainsborough border, along with a 0.3-second transition for smooth effects. Finally, set the position to relative and hide overflowing content with overflow hidden. Next, let's add a hover effect to our title cards. When the user hovers over a card, translate Y-4px moves it slightly upward, creating a lifting effect. Then, the box shadow adds a soft shadow underneath the card, making the hover interaction feel more dynamic and polished. Next, let's style the span elements inside our title cards. Set the font size to 11 pixels and use a font weight of 600 to make the labels slightly bold. Then, use text transform, uppercase so all labels appear in capital letters. Add 0.08 em letter spacing to give the text more breathing room, and finish with a dark Slata gray color for a subtle appearance. Next, let's style the H2 and P elements inside our title cards. For the H2, set the font size to 20 pixels, use a font weight of 700, and set the line height to 1.2 for a clean, compact heading. Then, target the P elements and set their font size to 13 pixels with a dark Slata gray color. This gives our headings and supporting text a clear visual hierarchy. Next, let's style the hero card to make it the main feature of our Bento grid. Set grid column, span 2 and grid row. Span 2 so the hero takes up 2 columns and 2 rows. Give it a midnight blue background with white text, then use justify content. Flex end to push the content toward the bottom of the card. Finally, target the span inside the hero and use a semi-transparent white color, making the label more subtle against the dark background. Next, style the hero H2 with a 30-pixel font size and an 80% maximum width. Next, let's create a decorative glow effect inside the hero card using the before pseudo element. First, set content to an empty string. This creates the pseudo element without adding any actual text. Then, use position, absolute so we can freely position the glow inside the hero card. Set top to -40% and right to -20%, moving the glow partially outside the card. Give it a width of 70% and a height of 140% so it covers a large area. For the background, use a radial gradient with our lime color fading into transparency. Finally, reduce the opacity to 0.4 and apply a 12-pixel blur. This creates a soft, glowing background effect that makes the hero card feel more modern and visually interesting. Next, let's make sure the hero content stays visible above our decorative glow. Target all elements inside hero with hero asterisk, then set their position to relative and give them a z-index of 1. This places the content above the pseudo element. Next, style the accent card by giving it our bright lime background. Finally, target the big element inside the accent card and set its font size to 40 pixels with a font weight of 800. This makes the project number large, bold, and visually prominent. Next, let's style the coral card. Set its background to #FF6B4A and change the text color to white for strong contrast. Then, target the span inside the coral card and use a semi-transparent white color. This keeps the status label subtle while maintaining a clean, colorful card design. Next, style the media card with a soft linear gradient from light blue to white smoke. Set grid row, span 2 so it stretches across 2 rows. Then, target the avatars inside the team card and use display, flex to arrange them in a row. Next, let's style the avatar elements to create the overlapping team member effect. Set the width and height to 34 pixels, then use border radius, 50% to make each avatar perfectly circular. Add a 2-pixel white border to separate the avatars, and use a linear gradient from coral to lime for a colorful appearance. Next, set margin left to -10 pixels. This negative margin pulls each avatar toward the previous one, creating the overlapping effect. Finally, target the first avatar with First Child and reset its margin left to 0. This keeps the first avatar in place while the others overlap neatly beside it. Next, let's style the quote card. Set grid column, span 2 so the card stretches across 2 columns, giving the testimonial more horizontal space. Then, target the paragraph inside the quote card and set the font size to 17 pixels. Use a font weight of 500 and apply the midnight blue color. This makes the testimonial text clear and visually prominent inside the card. Next, let's style the CTA card and its arrow. Set align items to flex start so the content stays aligned to the beginning of the card. For the arrow, set both the width and height to 38 pixels, then use border radius, 50% to make it circular. Add a 1-pixel Gainsborough border for a subtle outline. Next, use display, flex, align items, center, and justify content. Center to perfectly center the arrow inside the circle. Set the font size to 18 pixels, then use align self. Flex end to position it at the opposite side of the card. Finally, add a 0.3-second transition to prepare it for a smooth hover effect. Next, let's add a hover effect to the arrow inside our CTA card. When the card is hovered, change the arrow's background to midnight blue and its color to white. Finally, rotate the arrow by 45 degrees to create a smooth, interactive call to action effect. Next, let's make our Bento grid responsive for medium-sized screens. Inside this media query, the styles will apply when the screen width reaches 820 pixels or below. First, change the Bento grid to 2 equal columns using repeat 2, 1 FR. Then, target both the hero and quote cards and set grid column, span 2. This allows them to stretch across both columns, while the remaining cards adjust into a clean 2-column layout. Next, let's make the Bento grid fully responsive for smaller mobile screens. Inside this media query, the styles apply when the screen width is 520 pixels or below. First, change the grid to 1 column using 1 FR so every card stacks vertically. Then, set grid auto rows to auto, allowing each row to adjust naturally to its content. Finally, target every title card and force it to occupy 1 column and 1 row using important. Set a minimum height of 130 pixels to keep the cards consistent and comfortable on mobile. Next, let's finish the mobile responsive styles. For the Hero H2, reduce the font size to 22 pixels and set the maximum width to 100%, allowing the heading to use the available space. Then, change the header to a column layout and align its content to the start. Finally, add a 6-pixel gap between the header elements for better spacing on smaller screens. And that's how you can create a modern, responsive Bento grid using CSS. If you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more quick and practical CSS tutorials. Thanks for watching.